Thank you, Graham. Okay. Uh, Thank you for the introduction. My name is Marco Reininger. I'm the CEO of the Valiair group of companies, which includes Valiair, the trustee services provider, but also a host of other businesses, which include Part 135 charter operation here at Palomar Airport, an aerial firefighting outfit, a customs brokerage, and a few other lateral business units. How we ended up here is that the FAA decided after an investigation that Southern Aircraft Consultancy did not meet the U.S. citizenship requirements as stipulated in federal code, and therefore declared the current registrations invalid, which resulted in an immediate grounding of all aircraft because, of course, an aircraft can't fly without a current invalid registration. Faith reached out to us and asked if we would be interested in an acquisition of the company in order to get the current clients back in the air as fast as possible. After short deliberation, we agreed and have been engaged in problem solving ever since. The solution and when I say we, I mean us and counsel primarily, our attorneys in Oklahoma City. The solution that we agreed on with the FAA is to resubmit what's called an affidavit of citizenship. So basically restating that the citizenship requirements are now met by Valiair acquiring the company and the ownership and operational control of the company transferring to the United States. That's an affidavit under oath. So we did that in some 600 cases, notarizing that document once over, and then resubmitting a registration application for each aircraft. The FAA has been very responsive. Our attorneys and the FAA have been pretty fluid in their communication back and forth, and we've started seeing the first registrations returned on Friday. What's important to note there is that the FAA is not using the regular registration process for these aircraft, but instead they're using what's termed the priority process, which results in a temporary registration, colloquially referred to as a flywire, which gets sent by email, and then the operator can print that out and put it in the aircraft, and it acts as a valid registration until the cardboard 7-year registration card arrives. That saves time. So the moment the FAA or our attorneys email us that temporary registration, that flywire, the affected aircraft can fly, can get back in the air. So we're hopeful that the FAA is going to continue at the pace they have and work these packets very quickly. Unfortunately, Murphy got us today, even though it's sunny where I am. Pretty much everything east of the Rocky Mountains is covered in snowstorm activity. And so the FAA today was closed due to winter weather alert, and most of the FAA employees, or the FAA deeming it unsafe for the employees to come into the Mike Monroney Center. So that cost us, unfortunately, another day, but we're hopeful that the streets are going to be cleared by tomorrow, and that activity is going to resume tomorrow. I'd like to point out that we're all hands on deck in solving this situation. Everybody on the team, both the Valiair team and the outgoing Southern Aircraft Consultancy team, is working day and night, work day, weekend, doesn't matter, to get these aircraft back and flying. And I know it's not what anyone wanted. It's a great inconvenience. And so we're very appreciative of the patience that the Southern Aircraft clients have shown in allowing us the time to fix this situation and allowing us the time it took to engage with the FAA and get a workable solution approved. So we don't take that for granted at all. Obviously, we know there are other operators, other trustee services provider out there that you can choose. And so we do appreciate the patience and loyalty and the opportunity to make this right. Graham, anything I didn't cover right now that you think would be worthwhile for the members to hear?
Thanks, Marco. Yes, no, I think that was a really useful introduction to where we are and the effort you're making. I think it's fair to say that most people's experience um, with the Southern Aircraft team has been good up until now. I think one of the questions in my mind is going forward. We've had day-to-day contact has been with Faith, so in the UK. How will it work going forward in terms of day-to-day administration, day-to-day contact, if we need to ask for a bill of sale or any other reissue of a certificate and so on? Who will be the contact points and how will that work?
So as you pointed out, Faith and Jean are currently assisting us with the transition. So they're still very active in the communications with the existing clients because, of course, they have an existing relationship with them in terms of time zone. It makes sense, and they know the business better than anyone. Ultimately, the operational control and the day-to-day operations will transition to Valiair entirely. But we are a 24/7 global operation anyway, so we have offices on other continents and provide service around the clock essentially. So while at some point the direct communications will transition to our team and our team will be handling day-to-day requests, they'll be the responses will come in a manner that's convenient to you, and folks will be working while it's daytime, say in the United Kingdom or Central Europe. Um, but right now, as I mentioned, we're focused on solving the problem, and we won't stop until the very last aircraft is back in the air. And so Faith and Jean are working tirelessly, just like our team, and we're all working hand in hand to get that done. So for right now, there's not going to be an interruption in communications, and all emails and phone calls will be fielded to the absolute best of our abilities. And then once the crisis, if you will, is solved, which again we hope will be in a very near future, we'll regularize the day-to-day operational procedures, and we'll try to make it as minimally disruptive as possible for the existing Southern Aircraft clients, in the sense that in the beginning we're going to keep phone numbers the same, and if we can, and email addresses the same, and we'll just route those internally to the appropriate points of contact. I think the other thing to point out as well that's worthwhile is that while this is an unfortunate event, it's not a testament to the validity of the FAA non-citizen owner trust in general. The FAA non-citizen owner trust policy is robust. It's a very convenient and robust and legally sound instrument to affect aircraft ownership for or beneficial ownership for November registered aircraft for non-US citizens. It's tried and tested and proven. The important thing is that the selection of trustee is such that you have the right kind of partner. And that means a variety of things. It means the trustee services provider needs to conduct rigorous background checks in order to make sure that the contract partners are legitimate, not engaged in nefarious activities, and conducting rigorous background checks protects the entire trust portfolio. So we call it KYC, AML, know your client, and anti-money laundering. A trust company needs to have robust procedures in place, needs to spend a lot of money on software to do this, and come up with its own proprietary methods to make sure that illegitimate actors don't get let into the trust portfolio. The other thing, of course, is compliance. You want your trustee services provider to have a deep understanding of federal regulations and federal law. So these are the parts of the U.S. code that affect aircraft ownership. These are parts of the U.S. code that affect aircraft regulations, federal aviation regulations. You want somebody who has a deep understanding of those. You also want your trustee services provider to be compliant with state law. Of course, any trustee company would have to be organized in the United States, whether it's Utah or Delaware or Wyoming or Nevada. And there are local laws that govern trustee activities in each one of those states. So you want to make sure that they're in full compliance of their own state law. And in most states in the United States, it requires some sort of state supervision or state licensing in order to offer trustee services. You want a robust team that's quick to respond, that takes its obligations seriously, and you want a trustee that has succession handled in case there's an unfortunate event that affects the principles of the company. You wouldn't want a trustee that's a single member LLC, and then, God forbid, something happens to that single member, plane crash, illness, or whatever, and then the entity that holds title to your aircraft has nobody left that can transfer title to another trustee or transfer title back to you in case of that unfortunate event. So you want to make sure that that asset is protected through a system of succession and preparations for a catastrophic event. Yeah, and real quick, there may be some people who don't exactly know what the FAA non-citizen owner trust system is. In a nutshell, the FAA has a special policy that it published and clearly defined in the policy declaration or policy explanation that was published in the Federal Register, where it allows non-U.S. citizens who would otherwise be barred from owning American aircraft, U.S. registered aircraft, to effect ownership through a trustee, where the owner trustee holds title to the aircraft, and then through legal instruments, namely a trust agreement and an operating lease agreement, allows the beneficial owner of the trust, the trustor or settlor, grantor, to operate the aircraft within the limits of the law and essentially be a beneficial owner. The trustee's role there is twofold. Number one, be a good fiduciary to the client, but also protect the interests of the United States. That's an important thing to keep in mind. And that's why the US government allows it, because the trustee is an entity that, according to the policy, needs to be accountable and responsible to the US government in case there's a violation of the law or something else in the interest of the United States that needs to be addressed. There are other ways to affect trustee ownership as well. There are things like voting trusts, which we also offer at Valiair, where you can set up a separate corporation. It's a more complicated structure, but essentially the trustee holds your voting shares in trust and essentially becomes, the majority voting entity for that corporation. And that's also a system that the FAA allows. And I'll stop it there, Graham, unless you want me to elaborate on it.
That was great. Thanks, Marco. One more question from me, and then I've got a number of questions in the chat that I'll introduce. So can you give us and I've seen different numbers quoted of the number of aircraft that were affected under the Southern Aircraft Consultancy, ranging from 500 to 800. How many aircraft were actually affected, and how many do Valiair look after under the trust scheme? It'd be useful to get a feel for the size and scale of what you're already doing and the number affected and how you can absorb that.
Yeah. So the number affected was right around 580 or so. I say that with a little bit of ambiguity because there's always it's always in flux. People sell their, people buy them. So that was the I would say as close to an accurate estimate as we can get. Of course, some folks decided to leave immediately. So there was a bit of an attrition there. But we're still considerably above 500 aircraft that will be reinstated once the process is complete. On the Valiair side, we currently have a portfolio of around 600 aircraft, many of those on the U.S. registry, although we also provide trustee services for aircraft that may be on other traditionally considered offshore registries. So that could be Aruba, the Isle of Man, Guernsey, San Marino, and so forth. And then, of course, we also provide trustee services as voting trustees in corporate setups that are not readily identifiable as us with us as trustee because the aircraft is registered in the name of that corporation, and then we operate in the background. It's transparent to the FAA, but it's not transparent to the public. So if you will, we're essentially doubling our trust portfolio. Now, I will say that the distribution of aircraft type is slightly different. So we have a bit heavier exposure on the corporate jet and large aircraft side, whereas Southern Aircraft is predominantly in the piston segment. But we don't mind that at all. I'm a pilot and an aviation enthusiast and aircraft owner myself. I fly a piston aircraft, and that's part of why I'm in this business, is to enable people all over the globe to enjoy the joys of general aviation and be aircraft owners and have the ability to hop in an airplane and fly if they want to, irrespective of their local environment and the constraints they might be under. Not everybody is as lucky and lives in system where rules and regulations are followed and corruption isn't rampant. The UK is a very regulated place, and things are good there, but we have clients in jurisdictions where corruption and bureaucracy and inefficiency is so bad that if it weren't for the trustee ownership, they wouldn't be able to own an aircraft at all because the local environment is so restrictive. So we're proud in being able to enable those people on other continents to fly, essentially enjoy general aviation, which otherwise they wouldn't be.
Thanks, Mark. And we were all aviators, so I can't help but ask, what do you fly?
I fly a Piper Aztec.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's one thing that might cause people concern is seeing you pretty much doubling the number of aircraft you're looking after overnight is not an easy thing to absorb. How are you resourcing that, both for the initial getting everybody back flying, but also the ongoing support to owners?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, because we're not only a trust company or a trustee services provider, um, means that we have a robust infrastructure and staff that can absorb a lot of the extra work. So as I mentioned, uh, we're a charter operator. We currently operate 7 jets and are expanding on that side. We have offices all over the country and really all over the globe. And so both in terms of financial resources and personnel resources, we're able to dial up and down the rheostat depending on what the workload is. The other thing too is that kind of part of the DNA of our company is to use technology in the most efficient way and to not be asleep at the wheel, but kind of look at new technology as it becomes available and constantly optimize our processes. So in terms of our internal customer relationship management system, data management system, document management system, and such, it's already set up to absorb many, many, many more aircraft. It's very scalable. And so our IT infrastructure is going to make it very easy to transition all these accounts in and provide excellent customer service. Now, again, Faith and Gene are still on helping us with the transition. They're still working day and night. And it's also important to point out that Southern Aircraft Consultancy was not a broken company. They had robust systems in place. Their data management was sound. Their processes were sound. Their communication was good. And so it's not that we just have to that we're standing in front of rubble, something that may have crashed. It's a regulatory enforcement that was affected onto the company, but all the infrastructure that's in place is working, and so we're really not touching that right now because right now that's the best way to keep things running. We're focusing on getting the aircraft back in the air, and then once that's completed to everybody's satisfaction, then we can start slowly engaging in the transition into our infrastructure in a way that's the least disruptive to the people affected.
Okay, thank you. One more question coming from your comment that your existing portfolio tends to be more on the corporate jet world. Does that mean we're likely to see significant increases in cost for our rather less expensive piston aircraft, and less wealthy owners than corporate jet owners in the future?
Um, Well, let me put it this way. We structure our pricing depending on the value of the aircraft, right? So if you bring a Gulfstream G650 to us and we provide trustee services, you're going to pay significantly more than somebody that brings a Piper Cub. And there's a good reason for it. That Gulfstream G650 is a significantly higher liability exposure for us. And it results in extra cost for us because our excess liability insurance premium has to absorb that. And so obviously a 60 or $70 million airplane requires many more resources on our end than a $20,000 airplane would. And the pricing is commensurate with that. But again, and this is kind of what I mentioned earlier, you want your trustee services provider to invest the kind of money it takes to do this right.
Yeah.
Anyone can start an LLC, have a mailbox somewhere, and start sending in documents to the FAA and start registering aircraft. But that's a recipe for disaster. And so you want somebody who actually takes their role as fiduciary seriously and is a real company with real resources and real processes and real people that get real salaries and so on and so forth. And all that costs money. My opinion is that the trustee services provider, a lot of them in Europe, um, and it seems to be a phenomenon that's primarily concentrated with the providers in Europe, although there are a couple in the US that are fairly, that in my opinion, charge too little. And I don't think they charge enough to where this can be done the right way. Again, that's my personal opinion. The market has a habit of regulating itself. And to me, it's a decision that everybody needs to make for themselves individually. I personally, when I go out to look for services, especially ones that affect my aircraft, I always look for quality and cost efficiency. Right now, my aircraft is going through a full overhaul. We already had the paint and interior done, and now I'm doing the panel. I'm not going to go to the absolute very cheapest avionics tech because my life depends on what happens with that aircraft. So I'm somewhere in the middle with the provider I found, but I know they offer really quality work because they pay their people a living wage and they attract talent that assures they can do the job right. And it's the same thing with a trustee services provider. You want the folks that charge enough to do it right. Um, Now, I'm not evading your question. There most likely will be an increase in annual fees at some point, and there most likely will be a restructuring to where it reflects our pricing model, which is if you have a $20 million airplane, you're going to pay more than somebody with a $50,000 airplane. Right now, that's not the case. And to me, that's a missed opportunity to kind of get the resources in to optimize the operation and have it done in an equitable way where folks that frankly can afford it and who frankly will take up more of your resources also pay more. And that helps the people with piston aircraft because it allows us to keep their rates, at the lowest rate possible.
Okay, thank you. That was a very useful answer. So I'm going to throw the floor open a little bit now. Now, a number of people have put questions in the chat. Mark Saunders is the first one. Mark, do you want to speak yours out loud, or do you want me to read it out for you?
I see the question here. It's Mark's asking, I understand that Valiair will provide a US address for personal FAA licenses. Thanks for that question, Mark. I think what that's referring to is the new US agent for service requirement that the FAA made effective July 7th for existing certificate holder, which states that any US certificated airman, which includes pilots, but also includes aircraft and power plant mechanics, dispatchers, controllers, anyone with an FAA certificate who does not have a U.S. physical address listed with the FAA is required to appoint an agent for service. That is a service we offer. We are actually the market leader in that segment. So we have the most amount of U.S. agent for service accounts. It's a fairly low price, and it is something that anyone can already acquire through Valiair. We built our own internal software for this. We built an entire client portal. We have a very robust system in place where our office in Oklahoma City, which is not far from the FAA at all, receives the correspondence, and then it immediately gets scanned and becomes available for the airmen on their Valiair client portal. And then they can review it. And if it's the kind of correspondence they would want forwarded, like a replacement certificate, then they can select that option, pay for the shipping, and it gets sent to them via UPS, and they'll have it a couple of days later. There's a couple of things that are important to point out there. Number one, the FAA does not ordinarily send pilot's licenses to the agent for service because that's not considered service correspondence. The purpose of this law or this regulation, it's actually backed up by federal law, is for the FAA to solve a problem it's been having for many years, where if there were violations of policy or regulations committed by airmen or issues with an airman's medical, they didn't have the ability to serve the kind of papers to the airmen that they need in order to engage in, say, a disciplinary process, right? So, concrete example, if somebody is flying in France and they decide to fly drunk and they get a ramp check and they blow a high blood alcohol level, the FAA historically did not have an efficient means by which they can start enforcement action against that airman and pull their certificate because it's in a foreign nation. So serving papers in a legally meaningful way or a legally valid way has to follow the Hague Convention. So the FAA is then required to engage the local authorities, has to work through the U.S. embassy in that country, and then the local justice system has, it's really, really complicated. So the FAA said, no, no more of that. Everybody that's overseas or abroad has to have a U.S. agent for service right here in the States. We can send it via registered mail. That fulfills the requirement of service, and we can engage in the enforcement action or the regulatory action that we need to engage in if a person it violates the law, if a person ends up on a no-fly list, or, and again, this is probably more relevant to, or most relevant to a lot of people, if there's an issue with their medical certificate. If the aeromedical examiner sends something back to the FAA that defers the decision on their medical, the FAA is required to send correspondence by registered mail. And so that's actually most of the correspondence we see are issues with cardiograms, diagnoses, and kind of the process that you have to follow to reinstate your medical. So I don't know if that answered your question, Mark. It's already available. A lot of Southern Aircraft clients are already our client on the agent for service side, and it's available to anyone that wants to use us as their U.S. agent for service. For the aircraft, you don't need it because the aircraft's already registered to a U.S. address or a legitimate, U.S. trustee who would then themselves engage an agent for service. But all these reinstated certificates are going to have our Wyoming address. So there's not going to be a requirement for anyone to engage a U.S. agent for service for their aircraft. Everybody who doesn't have a U.S. address on their pilot's license has to do it.
I think what might be useful, Marco, is when this came out, I think a lot of pop-up people said, we can do this for you, we can do this. So we're probably all with random various agents for service. So it'd be useful to have a simple process for transferring that to yourselves. For those of us who are staying with you with our aircraft, it kind of makes a lot of sense to do that for our pilot licenses and medicals as well. So a kind of a simple, how do you transfer to a new agent for service would probably be quite a useful little document to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to provide that. There are a couple of videos already out there explaining the process because the FAA piece is not that uncomplicated because
Yeah.
the FAA systems are disparate and each one requires a separate login, so it's not the most user friendly. So we can add that. How do you transfer
Yeah.
um, to the information that's out there? Happy to do it.
Thank you. And thanks, Mark, for your question. Ian, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Ian Sager?
Okay, I think you may be able to hear me now. It's just a quick question. If we've already sent the certificate of registration back to Southern Aircraft and we're in the FAA queue somewhere, depending on how long that queue takes, what's the situation if we decide to go, you know what, we just want to go somewhere else? Does that become a problem to get the bill of sale back at that point if it's already in the system or not?
No, it's not a problem to get the bill of sale back because we'll just issue the bill of sale to you. Obviously, we're never going to hold anybody hostage. And if you come to us with a request to dissolve the trust and regain title to the aircraft, we will immediately comply with that. What it will lead to though is your registration will probably take longer because the packet is already with the FAA's technical section. And so if now documents are added to that, they will go in the queue and you'll probably end up spending more time on the ground than if you'd let that process play out at this point. And that's what we've been seeing is that a lot of the bills of sale that we've issued for folks to transfer to other trusts, but also folks to transfer to Valiair, might actually end up taking longer now that the FAA is processing the reinstatements. So, again, it's difficult for me to give you an exact number of days. It's difficult for me to make any kind of promises because, again, the FAA is the arbiter here, and everything depends on the speed by which they reinstate these certificates. But in terms of the sequence of events, I think at this point, transferring will actually end up costing you more time.
So is it fair to say, Marco, that now that the FAA have accepted the process that you've been working on, the quicker option is to reinstate within the existing trust than to set up to transfer to a new trust and get that set up and then get a new certificate? Whereas until the FAA had accepted that reinstatement process, the prospect was more likely to transfer to a trust, but now it's keep what you've got and reinstate the existing one is the quicker option.
That's my perception and that's my assumption because before the FAA had accepted it, we would file packets with a flywire and the regular examiners would examine them and it would happen at the normal speed. Now that they have accepted the process, what we're seeing is that transfers outward, whether it's to a third party or to Valiair, are ending up in the FAA's technical section as well. And there the process isn't as fast because it essentially requires second tier or back office review of the documents that were filed. So my assumption is, and I'm basing this on the evidence that I'm seeing, that it will actually take longer. And I'm not just saying that because I want to retain clients. Of course, I want to retain as many clients as I can. But we're also seeing it with people who are actually staying with us but wanted to transfer to Valiair. And with those two, I'm seeing those packets end up in the technical section. So even folks who want to switch internally, my advice to them right now is to let the current process play out.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you. Um, Adrian has put in the question is, are the registrations being done in turn or is it based on the timing of the return of the certificate of registration?
Yeah, so the initial submissions, because they were submitted to the FAA in batches, were based on the return of the certificate of registration. And that is an expectation the FAA has stipulated. They expect those certificates to be sent back and surrendered to the FAA. So right now, I don't exactly know what logical sequence they're following, how they're racking and stacking the packets. But and they're all, well, today they didn't work, but they're all going to be with the FAA. So in the beginning, yes. Going forward, I don't know. I don't know exactly how the sausage is made on the FAA side and how they prioritize or split up, the 500 something aircraft that registration packets that they're working on right now.
Okay, thank you. So Ben Regan, do you want to unmute and ask your question, as it's a more technical one?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me all right?
Yep. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah, slightly technical question, but when this happened, I had a look at the trust agreement, and it's quite an old trust agreement. And then I did some research, and I found that the FAA had issued some guidance in 2013 about what trust agreements should look like and what specific terms they should include in order to make the trustee, and in this case Southern Aircraft, do all the things that the FAA expects the trustee to do. So the question is really simple. Are you expecting any issues when you apply for re-registration of the aircraft, that the FAA will look at the trust agreements and say, well, actually, this doesn't really meet standards. It's not what we expect of a trust agreement nowadays. So then we'll have to redo a trust agreement and update it to meet those standards.
I don't anticipate that right now because the FAA, there's no transfer in title, and the FAA accepted the ownership documents as valid and on file and recorded. The only issue the FAA had was with the registration documents because the U.S. citizenship requirement hadn't been met at the time it was signed and essentially stated we meet the citizenship requirements. So it was that specific document and that specific registration document and that specific affidavit that the FAA essentially declared invalid, which is why it had to be resubmitted. That said, once all the aircraft are flying again and we've solved this situation, we will be looking at updating the trust agreements to bring them in line with what Valiair is doing. And that's mostly for liability, for liability purposes, and also to make sure that on this new portfolio, we meet the letter of the law at the state and federal level to its full extent. So there will be an update, but that will be very low effort. It will essentially be a DocuSign, one mouse click, read through it, one mouse click. We'll update the trust agreement that way, and then we'll update that with the FAA. It won't affect the aircraft's ability to fly. It's just good housekeeping on the legal side.
Excellent. Thanks, Marco. Thanks, Ben. That's a good question, especially as my trust was set up with Southern in 2004, so it was even older. So I think 22 years. Very helpful. Paul Sherry has got a question. I think we touched on this earlier, Marco. Understand that Southern Aircraft managed all their aircraft in a single trust. Does Valiair manage the process differently, i.e. separate trust for each aircraft?
No, Southern Aircraft does not manage all their aircraft in a single trust. Each aircraft in Southern Aircraft has its own trust set up. I think what you may be referring to is that Southern Aircraft, as trustee, is the registered owner for each one of those aircraft because they're not in voting trusts where a separate corporation is set up. But it's not the case that they're in one trust, which is the legal instrument at the state level that manages the asset. So Southern Aircraft already has a separate trust under Delaware law for each aircraft, and Valiair does as well. So nothing there is changing in terms of each client having their own statutory trust setup. What may change is the jurisdiction, and as we just discussed with Ben, the actual trust agreement itself may be updated in the future. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it does. The backstory to that is that we imported a US registered aircraft to the UK 10 years ago, and as you know, there's a wide range of prices, and this was a single engine turbine. I think at the time there were quite a few of us, and I think it was about $850,000. And one of our members, who was a lawyer, was absolutely against going with SAC because he had this kind of vision of this aircraft being lumped in with everybody else's, and if there was a bit of a meltdown, then, well, somewhat like what's happened recently, if there was suddenly a bit of a meltdown in the process, then everybody would be in the same boat.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. Although, again, if we want to compare apples to apples, it's right that, again, they're not in the same trust, but it's the same trustee that's registered. And so if that trustee faces enforcement action, like it did, for example, in the case of Aircraft Guarantee, or now in the case of Southern Aircraft, all the aircraft in the portfolio would be affected, which is why it's important that compliance is first and foremost on the trustee's mind, and that proactive measures are taken to prevent situations like this. But again, if you have a trustee who's the voting trustee for, say, a corporation that's set up, where each aircraft has their own individual corporation set up and a voting trustee that acts as trustee, and that trustee doesn't meet, for example, the citizenship requirements, well, that's not a secret to the FAA as well, or either. So there's nothing that says the FAA couldn't go ahead, do the homework, and say, these 200 corporations all have the same voting trustee, so they're all now grounded. Just because the registered owner is one company versus 200 companies, the trustee is still one single entity. And so enforcement action, I don't think, is impossible on the voting trust side either. But again, we offer that product as well. It's a bit more expensive because it requires more effort in terms of setting up a corporation, making sure the tax filings are done the right way, setting up the voting trust, and so on and so forth. It also kind of registering the corporation is more expensive. But I don't think it's a firewall, as some people like to present it. There's nothing on the regulatory side that would suggest that in my case, or in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks. John, you've got your hand up. John Favey.
Yeah, that's very, very kind. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's John Davey, not John Favey. I typed an F. Marco, it's one for you and anybody else can do this. I'm in a slightly unusual position. I was in the process of selling my aircraft, and all the documents or the certificate of registration was with Southern at the time this all struck. So Southern Faith has signed a transfer document to put the title of the aircraft back to me from the trust. But the person who's buying the aircraft from me is adamant that it's invalid. You got any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I was having a hard time understanding. There was a bit of background noise. Can you?
I'll try again. Mine's slightly unusual situation. When all this problem struck, my certificate of registration was with Southern Air because I was selling the aircraft, and I'd asked them to dissolve the trust and give me a bill of sale back to myself from the trust to go onwards to the new owner. The new owner and his potential trustee are saying that the certificate from Southern Air, Faith's signature, is invalid.
On the bill of sale.
On the bill of sale. What do you think?
I would say it depends when that was issued. If it was issued before the ownership transfer occurred, then no, it's not invalid. In the sense that the corporation is a valid corporation, the ownership was valid, and Faith's role as Faith's position as the officer with authority to sign that document was valid. What wasn't valid was Southern Aircraft's affirmation to the U.S. government that Southern Aircraft was a U.S. citizen. That's the FAA determined was incorrect. But what you're concerned about when you're selling the aircraft is a valid transfer of title. And so Southern Aircraft was always able to transfer title in a legally binding way because the ownership was never in question. It was the citizenship status that was in question. So again, as a foreign entity, you can hold title to an aircraft. You just can't register it as the registered owner, right? Mm-hmm. So if the bill of sale, for example, goes back to you, which it will or has, and then you pass it on to another owner, you're a foreign national, but you hold valid title to the aircraft. You just can't turn around and register it in your name. So there's no there's no reason why a buyer would have to reject that bill of sale. Now, if it was after the ownership change was consummated, then it would be me that, as the president, the new president of Southern Aircraft, that would have to sign the bill of sale. So I'll give you the exact date right now, and then you can tell me when this bill of sale was issued, and we can figure that out right now.
That's very kind of you. My wife's just rushing off to find the document.
Sure.
It was all done, probably done on the Friday of the week when this all hit, after the FAA grounded the aircraft, but before you came along, Marco.
So the purchase was fully executed on January 15th. So if the bill of sale has a date before that, you're good. If it has a date after, then I'm happy to re-sign that bill of sale.
So just say to me again, what was, if the bill of sale was on what date it's okay and what date it's not?
If the bill of sale was issued prior to January 15th, then, and Faith signed it, no problem. If it was the 15th or after, then I'm happy to re-sign it, and it'll be fully valid then.
Yeah, we just got it here. Hang on a second, Marco. 16th. I think it was the 16th. Wait a minute. Here we go. Where'd you find the date these things are signed, for heaven's sake?
It'll be at the bottom where the signature is. It'll say my hand on this, and then the date.
16th. It was the 16th, Marco.
And then who signed it?
Faith.
Okay. Well, what's if you want to share your tail number here, I'm happy to send you a new one, or you can just email us and we'll do it that way if you don't feel comfortable giving your tail number here.
No, I can give you my tail number, but I'll email you anyway if I may. Shall I use Southern Air's email address?
Yes.
Okay. So this was because this was signed on the 16th. It's not valid.
Well, technically, Faith had authority on that day to sign it, and I can alternatively provide you the document that gave her signature authority for the purpose of signing bills of sale on the 16th, as we were in the transition. So it is valid, but if the buyer wants full assurance, then I'm happy to reissue the same bill of sale with me signing it. No problem.
I think the former is best if you send me a letter saying it is valid.
Yes, we'll be sending you the signature authority document for the 16th.
Yeah. Did I just tell you the registration so you can trace it?
Sure.
N179JD. Thanks a lot, Marco. I'm really grateful for your help. It's extremely helpful to me, honestly.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your patience. And I love your wife's airplane necklace.
Spitfire. You probably worked that out.
Thank you.
Excellent. Sounds like it was incredible timing for you, John. The 16th, when it all happened on the 15th. So,
believe it? Would you believe it? Eh?
Yeah, but we're glad Marco can help resolve that for you.
Thank you. I'm sorry to take so much of your time.
No problem.
Okay. Anybody else want to put up any last questions? Then we've kept Marco for nearly an hour already, and I'm sure we've still got a lot of registrations to process.
I've got one, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I sent my registration back about 10 days ago. I just would like to get some sort of feeling for when I might get back in the air.
Yeah, so thank you first off for doing that. That was a really important step, and a lot of people did, and that showed good faith to the FAA, a good faith effort that we're actually taking their requirements seriously. We saw the first registrations come back on Friday. We were expecting more today, but the FAA was shut down due to the snowstorm. We're hoping that tomorrow, with folks back in the office, we will continue to see the registrations roll in. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you'll understand, I can't give you an exact date because I simply don't know when the examiners are going to get to your specific aircraft. But every single day, we're having registrations come in now. So we're hoping that this will all be resolved in the very near future.
Okay. What is the mechanism once the FAA approve it? What's the mechanism for getting the Flywire interim authorization? Do you send an email or do they send an email? How does that work?
Yes, the Flywire goes to us through council, and then we will immediately email it to you. And then you just print it and put it in your aircraft. That temporary registration is valid for 30 days from the date of issuance. And within those 30 days, we'll receive the cardboard card that you need to have on the aircraft, and we'll dispatch it to
Okay.
you in a courier, and
Yeah.
then you can swap those out,
Yeah.
and then be good for 7 years.
Yeah, I appreciate it's difficult for you to be specific about it, but I mean, are we talking days, weeks, months for this? It's just I've got a lot of flying I need to do and can't do it at the moment.
Yeah, so again, some folks already received theirs on Friday, so for them it was a matter of hours. And then for all the people that will have theirs issued this week, it'll be a matter of days. It won't be months. I can say that with great confidence. Could it be a couple of weeks if you're at the bottom of the queue? It's possible. Again, the FAA is actually very generous in assigning a lot of labor to this specific
Okay.
issue, and the examiners can only work as fast as the examiners can work. So
And that's understood. I just hope they don't do it alphabetically.
I don't think it'll be alpha. Oh, you mean alphabetically based on tail number?
No,
Well,
based on surname.
no, I don't think your last name affects the sequences. We're still trying to figure out what affects the sequence, but may never learn, the rhyme. Thank you, John. Sorry, I
Thank
don't.
you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Okay, any additional questions or comments?
Looks like Adrian posted one here. The FAA requirement for a pilot license address in the US, does this require the address to be a USA citizen? I think what that means is, does the agent for service have to be a USA citizen? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. I have to look that up real quick. What I can tell you, what it has to be is a physical address within the United States. So it can't be a virtual address or a mailbox. As far as appointing a third-party agent for service within the United States, I don't know if they have to be a U.S. citizen, because we are, so we never thought about it. But I will be able to tell you right now. If you give me one quick second, I'll just look at the law.
While Marco's doing that, I'm going to give everybody one last chance to put their final question in the chat. So I think we'd be good to finish by 10, so we keep it to an hour.
Graham, can I just ask a very quick question while saying thanks very much to Marco? If I understood it right, Marco, the first we will hear then is the Flywire email coming across and telling us the good news.
That will be the first thing you hear about your ability to fly your aircraft again legally. Yes. Okay, so if anyone's interested, the relevant law is Title 14, 3.301 through 303. And the definition of U.S. agent for service is found specifically in 14 CFR 3.302, where it says a U.S. agent for service is an entity or an adult individual who is 18 years or older with a U.S. address who a certificate, rating, or authorized holder or applicant designates to receive FAA service on their behalf. And then the definition of address is an address in the United States or one of its districts or territories or possessions. And then the definition of physical address is an address, again, in the US or any of its territory, but it excludes PO boxes, military PO boxes, mail drop boxes, and commercial addresses that are not also residential addresses. So what that means is you can't just go to mailbox.com or One Post Mail or whatever and get yourself a commercial mailbox at the UPS store or whatever. It has to be a physical address, meaning either a residence if it's a private individual or an office, a no kidding brick and mortar office if it's an entity. The law is silent on whether the agent for service has to be a U.S. citizen. So that tells me that there is no citizenship requirement. It's just the only requirement is that the agent is in the U.S. and has a physical address there. I hope that answers your question.
Right, and one question from Simon Whitehouse is: are you able to actually send an email to people to confirm when you receive their old certificates or when you receive the new ones to check that you've actually got the right email for them? Someone who set their trust up 20 years ago particularly might worry that email addresses have changed or gone astray.
Yeah, we'll look into that. One thing I will say is if you've been receiving our update emails over the last few days, I think I've sent 4 or 5
Yeah.
from the info@southern-aircraft email address, then we have your correct correspondence email. If you haven't been receiving them, then check in your spam folder. And if it's in the spam folder, add us to your trusted sender list so that they don't continue to go to the spam. And if you can't find them at all, then we probably don't have your current email. So in that case, it might be worth becoming proactive and emailing us just to make sure we have your correct email. But I'll look into what we can do there. I want to be careful with adding additional, batches of work to us that may not contribute to us actually getting these certificates reissued. But of course, we do want everyone to have, their certificate as fast as possible. So if we don't get a response to us sending out a certificate, then most likely we'll follow up and say, hey, can we just get a quick acknowledgement that you've received it?
I think that's really helpful, Mark. So the golden rule there is if you have not received Faith and Marco's email updates, and there have been several over the last couple of weeks, you better recheck that they've got your email address because they have been coming through regularly. If you have been getting them, then you can be pretty confident everything's in good order. Okay, Marco, any last comments or thoughts or questions you want to ask the UK pilots community, UK and Europe pilots community that you've got online here at the moment?
Well, I want to express my gratitude. I'm actually quite excited that we now have such a strong exposure in the UK, which was actually one of our weaker countries previously. So we're very excited to serve the UK general aviation and pilot community, aircraft owner community. I love the UK. I think there's a special bond between the United States and the United Kingdom, and we're all kind of together in our enthusiasm for general aviation and taking to the air. So I want to thank everybody for their patience and their loyalty and affording us the opportunity to fix this. I know that's not an easy thing to do. I know some people's trust was shaken, but we're going to do the absolute best we can to restore that. And again, we're all very, very grateful for the opportunity to fix this.
Okay, thanks, Marco. So, express a gratitude to you and your team who've been working your socks off trying to get this situation resolved, a situation not of your making. And we do appreciate that, and appreciate also the communications you've been sending out proactively over the last week or two. That's been reassuring and helpful. And I'm particularly pleased as well that I've sent a few emails in and left some voice messages trying to coordinate questions from various PPL members. So you're not getting 50 different questions all the same time. And in every case, I've had answers to emails same day, return phone calls the same day, when I know you must all be working really hard. That's impressive and has been reassuring. So thanks for that and for taking the time out this evening or this afternoon or late afternoon. It's still sunny out there through your window by the looks of it, to engage with us. So thanks everybody for joining. It was a good number at very short notice. I think it shows how concerned everybody is. Some good questions and really good open, honest answers from Marco. So hopefully in a week or two, this will all be history and we'll all be back flying. If not, we'll have another seminar to find out where we're going.
Absolutely. John asked for some of the weather to be transferred over. I'm not sure if I can, but you're always welcome if you happen to find yourself in Southern California. We have an excellent FBO here. There's free coffee and snacks, and who knows, if it's not a busy day, we'll take you up for a scenic flight anytime.
Fabulous. We'll take you up on that.
Okay.
Right. Thank you, everybody. We'll call it a day. Good timing. Thanks, Nathaniel, for setting up the logistics, and see you all in due course, and happy getting back in the air next month, I think.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much,
Marco. Thanks, everybody.
And Graham, thank you for organising.
You're welcome.